Did you see how drunk Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce were at the parade?
Yes, it was a little excessive.
I would say so.
I kind of look at it in not all cases, but there's a really good chance you're defending it because you're addicted to it.
Yep.
Like if I smoked like a normal person and I was not addicted to it, I wouldn't feel a need to justify my weed smoking. Can marijuana completely replace opioids? Vice versa? That's rocky for me. I don't know that I agree with that. And here's the reason why.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
Hello, everybody.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one that you choose to use, and thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us, info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, it's info@realrecoverytalk.com, and ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message, right, Ben?
Yes, sir.
Whew, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you today?
Good. First thing I want to bring up, and this is somewhat of a touchy subject, because obviously there was a shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs parade, but I do feel I would regret not bringing this up because it's, all over my social media. Did you see how drunk Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce were at the parade?
Yes, it was a little excessive.
I would say so. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about maybe a few episodes ago. I don't know. It was with Tambini. And we were discussing like people that are in the limelight and that are acting certain sort of ways. What do you think about that debacle of and I'm obviously the shooting and everything that we're not talking about that. That's obviously awful. It's terrible. We feel terrible for the families, everybody involved. What we're specifically talking about is, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google Travis Kelce drunk at Kansas City Chiefs parade. What do you think about all that, Ben?
So I'm going to quote my mother right off the rip. To whom much is given, much is required.
Ooh.
So
okay.
I look at it like this, and you got to keep in mind that I coach football. I'm currently coaching flag football. I have in the past I coached 4 seasons, I believe, of junior tackle football as well, from the age of 9 years old to up to 13, 14 years old. Over the years as Weston has played. And so in particular, this kind of hits home for me. These young kids that I watch play football and coach completely look up to guys like Mahomes and Kelce. Hands down, like it's their heroes. Right. You know what I mean? And, while I am of the camp at the end of the day, I keep in mind that I'm an alcoholic. That's my problem. And I'm not here to tell anybody that they can't drink if they drink responsibly and don't have a negative effect, on society, so to speak, like, driving drunk and getting in accidents, potentially hurting people, stuff along those lines. If you want to drink at the privacy of your home or drink responsibly at a bar or whatever the case is, fine. Like, I'm not here to say don't do that, right? Like, I stay in my own lane with my alcoholism. However, in their case, I would hope that they would recognize to a higher degree how many young people are looking up to them. And when they are acting like hooligans, especially, they won the Super Bowl. Yeah. What higher honor is there in at least the United States, America, for sports than that?
Right.
Like these kids that we're in South Florida down here. This is like the hub of football. So it just really kind of hits home for me because I really see how many kids in South Florida. South Florida produces more professional football players than anywhere else in the nation.
Is that true?
Yeah, the state of Florida in particular. But I believe that's even more narrowed down. Don't quote me on the South Florida thing, but for sure Florida does. I know Texas and what's the other one right behind it? Maybe
Alabama?
No, not Alabama, but they're, where kids grow up playing football year round because there's no winter here, so.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
It's just such a big part of the culture down here, and unfortunately, it makes me sad to see them act that way because I've seen, like, for instance, there are young guys from South Florida who have played in the NFL at this point that, like, have gone to local high schools around here, colleges around here, University of Miami, etc., Florida State, and they get to the NFL and they get in trouble with behavior such as this, getting arrested, things along those lines. So, like, I wish that they would keep a level of professionalism to it. They have so many eyes on them, and I just wish that they were a little bit more responsible with the keeping in mind how many young people look up to them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it was, and we weren't going to even bring this up, like I said, because of the shooting, but I feel like it should be brought up at least for a period of time because, in my opinion, I agree everything with what you said, but to expound on that, I think that even the parade in and of itself, you're still on the clock. As a professional athlete, I don't believe it's not like, and I don't know what the NFL rules are or anything like that in terms of substance abuse and acting like drunken idiots. But I would tell you that if I were Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, or if I was Andy Reid, or if I was the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs, I would have a serious issue with the way that they presented because, yes, you won all the games, you won the Super Bowl, you obviously dominated, and rightfully so, you won the Super Bowl. But your job isn't done. You still have the parade to go to. And during that parade, how many children were probably there? I have no idea, but I'm assuming there were a lot. A lot of children, a lot of young adults that were going for this parade to celebrate the winning of the Super Bowl. And then they're up there just acting like morons. I mean, and again, if you don't know what we're talking about, I strongly encourage you to Google it and you'll see the YouTube videos. It's going all over Instagram. That's where I originally saw it. You just see Travis Kelce up there screaming and slurring words. It's very apparent that he's being a drunken buffoon, and it's sad. I think it's really distasteful, and it puts a bad look on them.
There's a time and a place. Again, like, I know also that they're human beings, but I would just hope they would do better. And let me throw this out there. I was thinking about this, kind of knowing what we're going to be talking about today as well. We were downstairs with our therapist eating lunch, and we were talking about the differences between fentanyl and alcohol. And, I have to double check the stats on this, but I believe alcohol related deaths and are 4 times higher than that of fentanyl overdoses and deaths. Like, alcohol really takes a toll on society.
Right.
Again, if you do it responsibly, hey, whatever. But let me be straight up where I'm going with this. I would have rathered Mahomes and Kelce smoke a joint and get up there than be drunken buffoons. I think that they would be more respectful. Probably, maybe a little quieter.
Yeah, they'd be a lot quieter. Yeah, a lot more calm and probably sophisticated.
So,
unless it has the adverse reaction like it does me, where I turn into an anxious mess and start crawling out of my own skin. That's what it does to me. I don't like it.
Yeah. It's hard not to, and again, people might think I'm biased, and for our listeners, they've probably, if they're listening to our show, have been affected negatively in some capacity by alcohol, drugs, etc. So I realize maybe we're a little bit biased, but you can't argue the fact that people tend to have higher quality lives when alcohol is not involved.
Well, let's even take this to the, more of a family approach. I know that families out there, they all have a drunk Uncle Bob, And when drunk Uncle Bob comes to the gathering, everybody waits for drunk Uncle Bob to embarrass the whole family. It's like, what is drunk Uncle Bob going to do today to embarrass all of us? Because sure as hell, he's going to do something. And this is kind of what I would attribute this to. Travis Kelce is developing himself. He is developing a reputation of being not only one of the best tight ends to ever play in the NFL, which is great, but he's also developing a reputation of being an absolute moron. During the Super Bowl, he almost knocked over Andy Reid, going into a rage about a play that he wasn't in on. Followed up with the night that they won the Super Bowl, they're all in the club after the Super Bowl drinking, and it's very apparent that he's a drunken mess then. And then you go to the parade, and it's all the same thing, and even when after they immediately won the Super Bowl and they're all up on the stage in the arena, you have Travis Kelce just screaming at the top of his lungs, "Viva Las Vegas," and everybody was like, okay, this is kind of like a little over the top. You could even see like Taylor Swift, because of course they did a close-up on her as he's screaming this, and you could even see it in her face, like, oh, this is a little strange, I get it. He was excited and stuff, but this is the type of reputation that he's developing. And during this parade, there's also video of Mahomes and Brittany Mahomes, like they're in college grinding on one another. And she's like pouring whiskey into a water bottle, like she's at a high school, homecoming dance or something. Like it was, the whole thing was just, in my opinion, an absolute shit show. Granted, I'm bitter that Kansas City won the Super Bowl.
And let me throw this out there. You and I both probably acted more than that way.
Yeah, of course. But you know what? We didn't have millions of people watching us. I just had my friends that, the few that I had, 5 or 10 friends that, I would embarrass them. No big deal. It's whatever. We'll make up. Everything will be fine. But when you're Mahomes and Kelce and you literally have the whole entire country, all eyes on you right now, this is how you're going to act. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's a good look for Kansas City. I don't think it's a good look for the Chiefs. I don't think it's a good look for Andy Reid, Roger Goodell. I don't think it's a good look for Taylor Swift. And I don't think she'll put up with it. I honestly don't. She's spent a lot of time and a lot of years developing the reputation that she has. She's, for the most part, up until the last couple of years, stayed out of the limelight. Even though she's maintained being one of the best pop artists on the planet, she's been kind of kept to herself and everything else. She stays out of the press. You never see or hear.
It's respectable.
Right. And now I think Travis Kelce's dragging her in a direction that she's not going to want to go in. Just my opinion.
We'll see if you got the crystal ball there, Tom.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't mine. I didn't come up with that. My wife told me that. So
shout out to Amanda.
Yeah, shout out to Amanda. That's what, because she even said last night, she was like, can you believe this? Because she was on Instagram at night scrolling and this popped up. I hadn't seen it. And Amanda had come across Amanda's Instagram because she is all about Taylor Swift, and anything Taylor Swift is now related to Travis Kelce. And
I'm going to throw the old cliche. Sometimes a good girl needs a bad boy in her life.
I suppose, but I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily say Taylor Swift is a good girl. I think she's very smart and she's very calculated. Is she a good girl? I have no idea. I've never interacted with her, but I don't know. It's frustrating. But anyways, that wasn't what we wanted to discuss today. What we wanted to talk about today was this potential new bill, or I guess this new bill that got passed in Florida. And Ben has it pulled up on his phone, so go ahead and share on it.
I'm not going to read an entire article or anything, but this is the main highlight in one sentence. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has signed a bill that expressly prohibits sober living facilities from allowing residents to possess or use medical marijuana, even if the patient is certified by a doctor to legally use cannabis therapeutically in accordance with state law. Now, I did read a couple articles on this, and it talked about both the pros and the cons that people are arguing. And, again, I think, we started this episode with our opinion on the Mahomes Kelce thing, and this is also going to be opinion, but again, I think it comes down to circumstances in the same way where like Mahomes and Kelce need to keep hopefully in mind that they are looked up to by millions of people. In this case, there are going to be people that use marijuana appropriately, I guess you could say, and they manage it. They aren't out of hand. They're not alcoholics. They're not drug addicts. And then you got the folks like myself, like Tom, that it takes us in the wrong direction very quickly.
Well, I mean, my very initial thoughts, and I don't think I would be dissuaded from this line of thinking, is that if you are a house and you allow people to smoke weed in that house, whether you have a medical card or not, you're not a sober home.
Point blank, I agree with that.
Right. So, I mean, this bill is, I'm 100% in favor of it, obviously. And if you've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, you kind of know where Ben and I stand on this. And if you want to open up a house to people that they can, just sit in there and smoke pot all day and do that, that's fine. But don't call yourself a sober house, because you're not.
So I'll touch on this, and again, this is off our experience, and a big part of this podcast and us being on here is to share our experience. Tom and I have been in the field both about the same amount of time. We're, 11 years in the field now?
Yeah.
Yeah, and with that being said, we've seen a lot of cases. We've seen a lot of centers. We've
actually 12.
Coming up on 12, yeah. Okay, so where I'm going with this is there have been facilities locally, up until this bill just got signed recently, that were allowing marijuana to be smoked in their facilities. And literally, I know this for fact, their policy and procedure was that prior to a group starting, they come around with this locked up cart, like a tool. What's the tool boxes on wheels?
Yeah, like a tool cart.
Yeah, a tool cart. They unlock it, allow their clients to take a couple of hits off of their vape pen that's prescribed by the doctor, and then they go sit in group. Now, I'm just going to throw it out there that these places, I'm not going to name them because I like to, not get involved with controversy locally here. I like to keep my name clean and out of the drama, but have very bad reputations. I will say this, it is very obvious, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but their clients are never serious about recovery. They are generally these are the places that also, we just did an episode on it, take couples and allow males and females to be in the same house together through the treatment process, all that stuff. These places, in my opinion, have been looking for a way to, I'll call it what it is, market and get alcoholics and drug addicts to come to their facility. If I'm a young guy in early recovery or wanting to get sober, and you tell me that smoking weed's okay and you got a facility I can attend treatment and mom and dad will be off my back and the law will be off my back, the probation officer will be off my back, and I can smoke weed in your facility, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there for the wrong reasons. It's who's not going to be attracted to that if they don't know any better.
Are there any instances where you would be okay with it?
So I did read through these articles, and I get the point that I'm about to bring up, but I don't agree with it from a recovery perspective. One of the things that it brings up is that they say that there's evidence, and it was a few years ago that we talked about this on the podcast. They say that there's evidence that smoking marijuana helps with opioid addiction. But if I think back, I'd have to pull up the latest studies. Back then, what the studies were showing is that people could reduce their opiate consumption. Like, rather than being on 100 milligrams of oxycodone a day, they could be on 50 if they included marijuana with it, so that they weren't using as much opioid medications. Can marijuana completely replace opioids? Vice versa? That's rocky for me. I don't know that I agree with that. And here's the reason why. Marijuana, you take a hit and it's not working until you are high. If you have no tolerance, you take one hit of good weed, you are high.
Right.
You go from not high to high. There's no you know how when you drink, like if you drank a half a beer, you might feel a little warmth in your stomach, but then like a normal person would be able to stop.
Right.
You go from sober to high. There's no building your way up with weed.
Yeah, what you brought up is a good point. I do want to touch on something because I actually have experience with this with my dad. My dad, and I've talked about this on the podcast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this, but I remember one morning I came downstairs after a drunken night, and my dad says, "Tom, I need you to sit down." And I'm like, here we go. I'm getting in trouble. I drove drunk again, yada, yada, yada. So I sit down and my dad looks at me. He says, "Hey, is there any way you can get me a bag of weed?" And I'm like, whoa, okay. This isn't what I thought was about to take place. I said, well, let me see what I could figure out. And, through conversation, I was talking to him like, why? And I distinctly remember this. I was probably 22, 23 years old. And my dad had gotten sick with Wagner's it's called granular mitosis. It's like an autoimmune disease, and he got really messed up for a long time. And essentially what happened is his immune system turned on his nervous system, destroyed a lot of the nerve endings in his body, ate away a lot of his muscle tissue, so on and so forth. He didn't work for about 2 years, and it's chronic pain. And there was at one point, this goes obviously years and years ago, he was on massive amounts of opiates. And his reasoning of wanting me to get him a bag of weed was because he knew he was taking way too many opiates, and he wanted to try and come off of some of it. And I ended up obviously getting him a bag of weed, and things kind of went from there. I would get him weed and so on and so forth, and it was fine. And it ended up doing exactly what you said. It didn't replace the opiates, but what it did do was he was able to cut out, I want to say, more than half of the opiates that he was using. And I'm all for that. I think that's totally, I would much rather you smoke pot than taking, opiates, just because of obviously now the position that we're in, seeing what opiates does to people. It's a very, very, very slippery slope and very dangerous. Oftentimes leads people to heroin and fentanyl and stuff like that. And my dad is still on opiates to this day. And granted, everybody knows that he had a stroke and he's living with me now. And he's not, I don't allow him to use pot at my house because my kids are there, stuff like that. And he doesn't even bring it up, and he takes, he takes, and I don't think this is a lot. You tell me. It's a 1:15 in the morning and 1:15 at night.
Yeah. I mean, that's not bad.
Yeah. And he's been on that same regimen for years and years, at this point.
I would start the first half hour of my day with that. First 10 minutes
exactly.
of my first 5 minutes of my day.
So I think that's absolutely fine. And I think it's, the motive behind it. But what we're discussing and what this bill is talking about is people that are in a sober home. If you're in a sober home, the reason that you are in there is because you're wanting to get off of drugs and alcohol, at least in theory. That is supposed to be the reasoning as to why you're there. And it's not like you're in that house so you can manage your pain, which is what my dad was doing. My dad simply was using pot more as a pain management type thing, which I am 100% okay with. But this isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about primarily young adults that have been through the gamut. They're drinking like fish. They're, smoking massive amounts of pot. They're taking opiates, fentanyl, benzos, meth, you name it. And they're in a sober, or they come to Florida to go to treatment to get clean for whatever reason, maybe their parents send them here or whatever the case is. And then you got these places down here that are like, oh, we're marijuana maintenance. And it's like, what? And of course these young adults are gonna, wait, you mean I can live down here, be in a house, do treatment. That's going to keep my parents off my back. And then I can smoke my little peace pipe during or before group.
Well, to add to that, part of the thing was that they were, a lot of these places, I forgot to mention this, they kept their medical prescribed marijuana from the doctor at the facility locked up. However, they were basically turned a blind eye to the fact that most of the clients were getting weed off the streets as well.
Well, and some of them, and correct me if I'm wrong on here, not to cut you off, but some facilities will actually assist you in getting your medical card.
Yes, that was the case. So this, I believe, should have put a stop to it. And it's funny because I got a good buddy that does UR for some facilities.
UR is
utilization review, where they talk with the insurance companies.
Yeah.
And he actually left a couple places because the insurance companies don't want to see this. They don't want to see people using benzodiazepines, marijuana, stuff along those lines in treatment centers where they're supposed to be addressing substance abuse. So he quit a couple places because they were asking him to leave this information out. Hey, under the radar from the insurance company, we're letting our clients smoke weed, but don't report it. Yeah, and he doesn't want to get all wrapped up because that's insurance fraud too on top of it. Yeah. Good, bad, nor indifferent, regardless of what side you fall on. Like, who wants to get caught up in insurance fraud? You might be an advocate for people smoking weed, but if that's the case, like, are you willing
if you're withholding the information?
Yeah, it's being dishonest. And
because the insurance companies will ask. They want to know.
Yeah, they want to know why your drug testing is still got marijuana in it, so it's kind of a sketchy situation there. Like, these facilities are asking their employees to not document stuff or report stuff properly so that they can continue. And again, I believe that the motive is attracting clients. And one of the pros to the bill, because I already brought up that, some people are on the side of it's a bad thing to get rid of it and not allow marijuana because it can be used therapeutically. But the other side to it is if you have folks in there that genuinely want to be 100% abstinent from everything, let's say, you and I are roommates in a sober house and you, Tom, want to be 100% abstinent, but they allow marijuana, so I'm in there smoking weed next to you. How does that affect your recovery?
Right.
So that was one of the things that were brought up, and other, people in the article in the comment section are like, oh, well, that shouldn't affect them. I'm like, again, going back to your original point, if you're on weed, you're not sober.
Right.
Your mind is altered.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just speaking to it from that perspective.
Well, and somebody's going to say, and I already know it because it happens every time we talk about this, somebody's going to say, oh, well, then you're not sober if you drink caffeine, or you're not sober if you smoke cigarettes or take nicotine in any form, and it's like, oh, for God's sakes.
This is, again, based off my experience, so it is subjective, where I'll sit here and tell you marijuana inhibits my judgments. You know, I move a little differently. I'm a little, for lack of a better way to explain to someone that's never been stoned, you're like a little out there. Caffeine doesn't do that to me. Nicotine doesn't do that to me.
Right.
You know, is there an effect? Yes, there's an effect from caffeine. No, I'm not saying that. But the level of how much does it inhibit you mentally is what I'm getting at. There's a big difference between marijuana and caffeine.
Yeah. And, you know, the same goes for sugar as well.
Yeah.
You know, you could really put sugar in that camp too, because sugar could be a mood and mind altering substance, I suppose, because of the dopamine release when somebody, you know, that's a legit food addict, or, you know, I mean, just look at children. Children is a good example of this, and I'll use my children as the example. If I say, you know, we're going to go out for ice cream, they could all be in the worst moods. Crying, you know, Hattie just socked Levi in the face and they're fighting, yada, yada, yada. And I say, you know what, kids, let's just forget all this. Let's go get ice cream. Boom. Immediate change in their affect. And even if you think about, and I'm just now really kind of putting this together, the same went for me when it came to alcohol. I would be at work just dying, you know, couldn't fathom the idea of being there another 7 hours, another 6 hours, another 5 hours, counting the minutes until I could get out of there. But as soon as I knew I was getting closer and closer and closer, and I would finally get out and I'd be on my way to the bar, everything would be okay. Because I knew I was going to get what I wanted ultimately, you know? So, of course, you can put a lot of these things as you're not sober. But listen, reality is you're not going to rob grandma, you know, for an Oreo, you know, no. Nor would you probably rob grandma for a bag of freaking pot, but you may. I don't know. I
probably would have.
Would you?
Dude, I was severely addicted to weed.
Yeah.
Big time. I smoked all day, every day through high school. To anybody that says it's not addictive, I'm calling BS.
Well, listen, a dear friend of ours he's addicted to it, and he'll openly admit that he's addicted to it. Yeah. He's tried stopping numerous times.
Oh, he said to me, he's like, dude, I know my life would be so much better without it.
Yeah.
And this is a guy that does decent for himself. I want to touch on that for a second, though, because I would
say he does more than decent. I would say he does actually very well for himself. He's a hustler.
He would do way better.
He would do a lot better. Yeah, we're going to share this episode with him.
Yeah, for sure. Where I was going with this, though, too, is just back to quality of life. And I'm going to be referring to the real drug addict, real alcoholic, because you're going to have people jump in the comment section here that are like, oh, I quit drinking and all I do is smoke weed. Well, you might not be a real alcoholic to begin with. And I get, like, it could be all over the place. So, again, this is just our opinion based off of our experience. But I know several people who had multiple years of recovery, 5 years, 6 years. They were really doing the deal. Their lives were going great. They start smoking weed, and didn't go back to hard drugs or drinking, but all of a sudden their quality of life, you could just tell, has gone down significantly.
Gain weight.
All of a sudden they've gained weight. They're depressed. They're not holding jobs. They're not making as much money. They're like, you know, because I keep in touch with a lot of these people that I got sober with that had 5 years of sobriety, 6 years. These are people I had really good relationships with. And just because they started smoking weed doesn't mean like I cut people off. Like I stay friends with people because they're good people, you know, but it's not like, you know, Tom, if you started smoking weed, we'd still be friends.
Yeah. I think you'd be very jealous of me, actually.
What do you mean?
I'm just kidding.
Like I'd want to smoke with you?
I would never. Yeah, no, I'm joking.
But point is like I've just seen so many cases where all of a sudden you just see their quality of life go down.
Yeah.
Or I'm going to throw it out there again, my opinion, but if you generally, oh man, I'm probably going to get burned for saying this one. If you look at the comment section, and this is me being, what's the word? Not prejudiced, judgmental, I guess. Yeah, we all are to an extent. This is me being judgmental. Generally speaking, when I look at the comment section of folks that are like more pro marijuana and they really start arguing about it, I look at their profile and it looks like their life is a mess. Going back to they act like Kelce and Mahomes did at the parade.
Yeah.
And you could tell on people's like Facebook profiles, like what kind of life they're living, what principles they're living by. Now, I'm not saying that's everybody because, like, to be straight up, I got some relatives that smoke every once in a while, and they are the most professional, normal, upright, outstanding citizens. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people that feel like they have to defend their marijuana use because chances are, if you're so adamant about defending it, I kind of look at it, in not all cases, but there's a really good chance you're defending it because you're addicted to it.
Yep.
Like if I smoked like a normal person and I was not addicted to it, I wouldn't feel a need to justify my weed smoking. Oh, you don't agree with it? That's okay. Have a nice day. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate your opinion.
Yeah.
Versus like trying to defend it and argue and getting really upset in the comment section on Facebook. But then you got the trolls, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I think Ron DeSantis signing this bill when it comes to substance abuse facilities was a step in the right direction. And it did bring up some other states that feel differently. I want to say one of them was Oregon or Washington.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Yeah, of course.
But check it out.
California, New York, Oregon, Washington, all of Colorado. Probably all those states.
But I have my point with that is that you also have to keep in mind Florida is way ahead of the curve than most states when it comes to substance abuse treatment.
Yeah.
We are the original recovery capital of the world, not of the United States, of the world. We did all the bad things in Florida. We introduced the Sober Home Task Force, all that stuff here in Florida. Florida is the model for the legislation that all the other states are trying to put in place to have good substance abuse now.
Right.
So, like, keep in mind, we tend to be ahead of the curve here in Florida. Everyone else is a few years behind. From what I understand, California is like the Wild West right now. Yeah. You know, a lot of people doing out there. West.
Not just in substance abuse, in every other aspect of California, too.
Yeah.
Crazy town out there, boy. Mm-hmm. Out there, it's Walking Dead. Literally. It's like, it's a shame. Well, anyways, that was fun, Ben. Good topic. I'm glad we got to discuss that. Anything else?
No.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you for tuning in. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you could always reach us. info@realrecoverytalk.com. Again, that's info@realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.